we're going to look at now is just his foreign policy. How do we move to basically nuclear annihilation, which will almost get its pinnacle in Kennedy's administration? A lot of it deals with his advisor, okay, John Foster Dulles. John Foster Dulles is going to bring up this idea of brinksmanship. So let me explain brinksmanship with something you may know. How many of you have ever heard of chicken? What is chicken?
The game.
It's a game. Yes, what happens in this game?
People typically die.
Okay, typically die, but there's two cars. What are they doing?
They drive at each other.
Okay, and the one who veers off the road is seen as what?
A chicken.
A chicken, and the one who keeps on going is the strong one. Basically, this is what John Foster Dulles wants to do. He says, we need to build up our nuclear arsenal. We need to build it up so massively that it will cause the Soviet Union to do what in our nuclear chicken? Back down. We are going to go into an era of nuclear chicken. And he says the art of backing down will cause us to be superior. And so, I don't know what, it's pulling on my Google image that I took. Do y'all get brinksmanship?
Aren't
So,
we still in the middle of a game of chicken?
we are now with, yes. And we're going to see basically all of this stuff is from World War II is going to build up to a point in the Cuban Missile Crisis, which we'll get to, and the Vietnam War. And then it's going to decline down, and then we get to Reagan, and he brings it right back up, because you're going to see that he's going to bring up this thing called Star Wars that's supposed to annihilate nuclear missiles with a laser. The only thing you see that lasers do is entertain cats. Okay? Very effectively. Okay? In order to do this nuclear chicken, we need to create better planes. Gosh, this is kind of like today, right? We need to create better planes that can carry heavier payloads. So Eisenhower is going to focus on building up the Air Force. He's going to take away money from the Army and the Navy and filter it into the Air Force. And we realized if we're going to go into a nuclear war, it is going to rely on the Air Force. So we will be building up our super bombers. The other thing that we were getting to is how do we get to Vietnam? At the end of World War II, we know that most of Indochina has been taken over by the Japanese. We dealt with that in Korea, and now we're trying to deal with it in this Indo-Asia area. The French are going to try to regain control of this area, but they have a problem. They don't have money. So does the U.S. owe the French? Yes, we kind of owe them because of what event in history? American Revolution, right? They came in and helped us. So the U.S. is going to back them with money at this time. At the same time, Ho Chi Minh is going to write a letter to Truman saying, look, we are a people like y'all. We're trying to get our independence from a very oppressive motherland. Ooh, gosh, he brought up the American Revolution. Who are we going to help? Ho Chi Minh seeking his independence or the French?
Ho Chi Minh.
We think Ho Chi Minh. We help the French. And this is what causes Ho Chi Minh to turn to communism. Okay? And so, basically, the French lose at Dien Bien Phu. And this is what's going to lead the U.S. to sit down at Geneva to negotiate peace. We sit down because we've been bankrolling the French. And what is going to happen is at the Geneva conference, we're going to agree. Here's Vietnam. Sorry, I do not draw well. We're going to divide it at the 17th parallel. What should this remind you of? Korea. Germany, yes, Germany was divided. We have a lot of divisions. Okay, we're going to promise that in a couple of years that we're going to have free elections. Doesn't that sound like Germany? Doesn't that sound like Korea? Do free elections ever happen? No. What will eventually happen when they're never held, we're going to see Ho Chi Minh is going to establish control in North Vietnam. He's going to endorse an idea of communism. Eventually, we're going to put another guy in power in the South. His name is Diem, and he's going to be a nationalist for democracy. Whoa, doesn't this look like Korea? Okay. In Korea, who is the aggressor? North, and we're going to see an invasion. Okay, oh gosh, I already had this drawn out, so you didn't have to see my horrible thing. So Ho Chi Minh will establish control of North Vietnam. We're going to see that he will become very popular with the people. Because if you look at these two guys, here's Ho Chi Minh and here's Ngo Dien Diem. Who looks more like a Vietnamese person? Okay, the top one, right? Vietnam is a nation of agrarian people. Who looks like the farmer? Ho Chi Minh. Do y'all know what the dominant religion in Vietnam is?
Buddhism.
Buddhism. Does Ngo Dien Diem even look like a Buddhist? No. Eventually, when he comes to power in South Vietnam, he's going to rip apart Buddhist pagodas.
Didn't he ban it?
Yeah, he bans it, and he burns them. He rips them apart. He takes away farms from the lower class. Is he going to be popular there? No. And so this is why a group of people will rise up and challenge him called the Viet Cong. And this is who the U.S. will go and fight in the Vietnam War. You've watched Forrest Gump, some of y'all, right? Mm-hmm. And he says there's Charlie all over this place. Charlie is the code name for the Viet Cong people who are Southern Vietnamese who are trying to get rid of Ngo Dien Diem. The U.S. has backed him, but he is a capitalist in a socialist society. He is a Catholic in a Buddhist society. And do any of his policies help the Vietnamese? No. And so this is who we're fighting. And we'll eventually have a reading on this. And so the reason why the U.S. gets involved in Vietnam is because we fear the domino theory. If Vietnam falls, this is going to lead to Laos and Cambodia falling, Indonesia falling, all of Southwest Asia falling. And so we just have to stop this one. Doesn't this kind of sound like containment? Contain it where it is so it continues on from George Can. So Stalin has stopped stalling around and he's finally died. And and now Khrushchev has come to power, but he's realized the Soviet Union's life for their people is very rough. And he wants to go away from this massive brinksmanship. Remember, what's massive brinksmanship? We're building up our what? Military to cause the other side to do what? Back down. And he says, look, that is killing us. He wants a peaceful coexistence between the U.S. and the Soviet Union so the livelihood of the Soviets could get better. He wants peaceful coexistence. And now y'all are looking at this bottom photo, right? Does this look like peaceful coexistence? No. One of the things that you have to understand with many people of Southeast Asia and of the East is that any time you enter their home, what are you supposed to do with your shoes? Take them off because they're seen as dirty. And when they're real feisty about something and angry, they often have their shoe and they're going to throw it. It happened to George Bush when he was in a, we'll look at that later. But there's going to be events that are going to occur under the Eisenhower administration that's going to rile up Khrushchev to challenge the U.S. and go back into nuclear chicken. Yes? Oh, you have no question? Right? So Nikita Khrushchev. It's going to look like Gorbachev. They're both bald guys, but Gorbachev basically has a birthmark on his head that looks like the Soviet Union. All right. So now what we need to look at is Hungary. Remember, we have made it a promise that we were going to contain communism and help the people who want to resist communism. And there is a group of nationalists in Hungary who are saying, look, we are demanding democracy. So who should come and assist? America. We should come in. But we're going to see there is communist control here. And if we go in and they are there, what are we going to go into? A war, because we're in brinksmanship. So do you think the U.S. is going to help? No. And the Hungarian uprising will fail. Y'all had one of the questions on there, the Warsaw Pact. Again, the Warsaw Pact is all the communist nations coming together saying an attack on one is an attack on all. And we will assist each other. Well, the Warsaw Pact basically comes in and they prevent Hungary from achieving its independence. And now we are going to see the U.S. was willing to help, but if we went in, what would this have led to? War, because we're in the art of brinksmanship. So this is going to sour our relationships with the Soviet Union. Okay? Our next problem is the Suez Crisis. And I have to do this with an analogy first. Okay, how many of y'all have gone on trips somewhere and you asked your parents for money? Do y'all ask for money from your parents both at the same time? Some of you are saying no. So you're saying yes. Okay, we'll talk about yours. Why do y'all ask them at separate times? You can get more. You ask Dad, hey, I'm going on this trip, I need money. He's like, here. And then you go to Mom, hey, I'm going to this trip and I need money. And she gives you the money, right? What has just happened to your take home? You have more, okay? Why do you ask for both of them at the same time?
Because they'll give me more.
They'll give you more. So you're the isolated incident, okay? What are y'all hoping that when you ask for them separately that they will never do? Ask each other, did you give him money? Did you give him money? Because what's going to happen? They're going to get upset. And this is exactly what happens in the Suez crisis. We're going to see President Nasser of Egypt is trying to build a dam on the Nile River. Because y'all learned last year, the Nile River, what does it always do? Flood. It's predictable, right? But is that good?
No.
And so they're trying to build a dam so they could get hydroelectric power from the river. So he's going to go to the Soviet Union and ask for money. Are they going to give money? He's going to go to the U.S. and ask for money. And they're going to give what? But what is Egypt hoping that both of them don't find out? That they both gave money. But what happens is they do. And so the U.S. wants to pull out money. And Egypt says, if you do that, we're going to take over the Suez Canal and we will not let your ships out. For all of NATO. Oh gosh, is he threatening? And so he's like, man, we need our money back. We're kind of upset about this. So they're going to send in forces. Wait, can they really send in forces?
No.
Who must they check with first? This new organization, NATO. They must go through the UN. And we're going to see the UK and France are going to send in troops because their trade is going to be stifled because y'all remember they used to have to go around Africa? And this Suez Canal basically lessens that 4-month process before to about 2 weeks. And now, with our faster ships, it's basically 3 days to get there. Okay? And so, it stops the crisis. Egypt will nationalize the canal, and they have money for their dam. Who do you think Egypt is going to be part of now? Is it going to be part of NATO, or is it going to be part of Warsaw? Warsaw. So, we realize the threat because of Egypt, that these nations in the Middle East may fall to the Soviet Union, to the Warsaw Pact. And so y'all had this on your study guide, the Eisenhower Doctrine. Before, we've had Truman. Who did Truman said he was going to give to aid to? 2 places. How do you like your turkey? Greasy, right? So Truman Doctrine deals with Turkey and Greece. Well, because what has happened in Egypt, he's very fearful that this area of the Middle East that is so close to the Soviet Union can fall to them. They also have a very important resource. Oil. America used to be the #1 producer of oil, but what have we done to our oil reserves? Obliterated. And so Eisenhower Doctrine, I always remember it starts with an E, right? Is going to help us defend the Middle East. Okay? So Truman, how does he like his turkey? Greasy. That's who he gives aid to. Eisenhower is going to focus on the Middle East. That we do not want it to get involved with the Soviets. And this will lead us to going into these nations, backing in people who are pro-U.S. And do you think the people of those nations are going to like that? This will eventually lead us to Iranian hostage crisis. This will eventually lead to a lot of people revolting and trying to move the U.S. out, and then it will lead us into the global war on terror in 2000. Okay? This is Sputnik, right? Who achieved this? Russia. And Sputnik is this first unarmed satellite that goes into space. It basically signals to the U.S. that we are behind the Soviets. We were ahead in the atomic race, right? We got the atomic bomb, they got the atomic bomb, we got the H-bomb, they got the H-bomb, and we started building up our bombs. But now we're moving into a new phase in the Cold War, which is intercontinental ballistic missiles, but we first need to get satellites first. And so this is why we create NASA. And I also focused on why the Department of Education was created, because we realized those Soviet kids were getting chemistry, they were getting physics, they were getting calculus, and our kids here at home were busy trying to figure out the dance moves. And this is what's going to lead to us upping up the education, and this is why y'all have physics. This is why y'all have calculus. Dang, Sputnik, right? And Puritans who bring out tax-supported education. Okay, so tensions are going to start increasing because of Sputnik. And this is going to lead to the kitchen debates. And it's actually a debate about kitchens. And it's a debate about technology. And Khrushchev and Nixon are going to meet about this. And again, Nixon has a great foreign policy. He's been involved in it. And they look at a typical American household. Do you think this looks like a Soviet household? Do they have all of these consumer items? No, because where have they been filtering all of their stuff into? Building up military stuff, right? Sputnik. And Nixon's going to say American lives are way better because we have color TV. We have these inventions. But Khrushchev is going to tote the Soviet Union is better technologically because what invention do they have? The satellite. And so it's going to be this argument. And really TV helps this. Amidst this whole kitchen debate, we are sending over spy planes over the Soviet Union. They fly at such high altitudes that they cannot be detected. But when you fly at high altitudes, what is very thin? The air. And so what is it going to cause? If it's very thin air, what does it cause people to do? Pass out. And this often happens with our G2 men that are up there and they pass out. And so what happens to the plane? It goes down, they get more oxygen, they wake up, and what happens? It goes back up. And so what they're going to realize is this plane was taking reconnaissance information over the Soviet Union. Shot down. What's going to happen to relations between the U.S. and the Soviet Union? Deteriorate. One of the things that they discover is that our best... Gunner?
I just need a...
Okay. Say hi to the camera.
Where?
We're recording.
Oh, hey. Sorry for the interruption.
It's okay.
I'll take care of it.
Okay. We'll record again. Unless that's the best recording and I'll put that one in. Okay. Basically, so one of the side notes, any of y'all petite females? They realize petite females make the best pilots because their oxygen has to travel less at a lesser pace than a tall man, and tall men pass out further, like quite frequently, not further, okay? They pass out quite more frequently. And we're gonna see this is done in NASA because NASA starts to test pilots, and they started to first test women. And they started seeing short, petite women, their oxygen travels faster because they have a shorter span to do it, and they don't pass out as much as men. I don't know, I just think women are tougher. But they realize they're going to start to look at women to be pilots at this time. Okay, so here's our guy. He's really tall, passes out. And this is going to lead us to problems. Eventually, another problem that happens deals with Latin America. We have backed, since imperialism, pro-American presidents there. And it goes to Cuba that, remember, we helped Cuba in their independence, right? And we put in the Platt Amendment that we're supposed to protect items. Well, this has led to resentment. And the U.S. has backed this guy named Fulgencio Batista. And he's done things that benefited the U.S. All the money flows out. Does it go back into Cuba? And so Che Guevara and Fidel Castro are going to say that isn't fair. That they should own the items in their country. And what this will lead to is he's going to start to endorse communism. And this leads to Khrushchev being really happy. Look how happy he is. Because now, what could he put in Cuba? Missiles. Because the U.S. already has missiles somewhere. Remember in Truman's doctrine? Where were those two nations that we were so concerned about?
Turkey.
We have missiles there facing the Soviet Union. They could get to Moscow, St. Petersburg in 5 minutes. If he were to put missiles in Cuba, they could get to D.C. within 7 minutes. So is he happy? Yes. He sees his new BFF. And this is going to lead to Khrushchev giving aid. And eventually it's going to heighten in the next one when we get to Kennedy, that this is going to lead to the Cuban Missile Crisis. That the U.S. is going to feel so threatened by those missiles there. We're going to see the U.S. will break diplomatic relations with Cuba. We will see a fleeing of pro-American people who are Cubans into Florida, into Havana. We see out of Havana into Cuba, into Florida. And this is what's going to lead Eisenhower to changing his tone. You will definitely see this on this test. Eisenhower is going to say, whoa, what have I done to the military in his time period? Has he declined it or increased it? He's increased it dramatically, right? Because what are we playing between us and the Soviet Union? Nuclear chicken. He says in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influences in the military-industrial complex. Our military has become so massive that couldn't lead us into war. He's very fearful. He says the potential for a disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination of power that the military has endanger our liberties. Could our military take us into a war? Yes. And he is leaving the presidency knowing that he's funneled a lot of money into Lockheed Martin, into McDowell, into Boeing to create a massive military. And he's leaving this in someone else's hands, and is he fearful? Okay. That's where we end. We're going to watch Happy Days.